Over this last weekend, we saw it finally be set in place, and that is none other than the Final Four for both the men's and women's college basketball. You had this one giant tournament, now down to four of the best teams still standing, and some might be easily predictable, some, on the other hand, aren't. And that is why we love March Madness college basketball, because anything can happen and it's always at its best. Also, this last weekend, we saw the start of the MLB regular season baseball, and it's already off to a very fiery start. Although it is a 162 game season, the first week of the regular season always matter, and we are going to talk about that and why it matters the most. I am your host, Matthew Raridan, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. I want to start by saying I hope everyone had a wonderful Easter holidays with your family. If you spent time with them or whatever you may have done, I hope you had a great weekend. I know I did. I love this holiday because, well, the food, any holiday that has food around, I'm loving it. That's why Thanksgiving was usually my favorite growing up, because I sure do love me some food, home cooked food, and this weekend definitely did not fail in that category. But from the Total Sports family, we hope that you guys had a great Easter holiday as well. I want to go ahead and introduce my co-hosts here, and first we've got David Street.
Hi, guys.
And we've got Ed Smith.
Welcome.
Ed, it's great to have you back from vacation. I hope you had a great time. I could see you got very tanned. I'm a little jealous, but
this is from driving.
Yes, exactly. It's the glass reflection that really burns you up. But good to have you back. Glad you got back safe. But this last weekend was action packed in many different categories. But I think the elephant in the room, which we have to talk about, and that is men's college basketball, because the Final Four is set. I mean, we are dwindling down to the very end here, the best of the best that are remaining, and it may not be.
There is a literal elephant in the room.
Yes, absolutely, there is, and and it may not be who you were expecting. We did see some upsets with Houston losing. Creighton lost as well. I mean, there was a lot of top teams in there that were expected to possibly be there at the end, and two of them, though, remain, and that is two of the number one seeds with UConn and Purdue. They have made the Final Four, and yes, like David said, a literal elephant in the room, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide and the NC State Wolfpack. And yes, you heard that right on the last two, Alabama Crimson Tide and the NC State Wolfpack. These were two teams that were not expected by far to make it there, especially NC State. They're only in the tournament because they won the ACC tournament. But hey, that's just how the cookie crumbles when it comes to March Madness. They did what they needed to do at the end, and here they are in the Final Four. But the talk of of town is, guys, can anybody beat UConn?
I don't know. I mean, listen, man, as a Florida fan, I knew at some point our streak of, being the last team to go back to back would come to an end eventually. But can we just keep that streak going a little longer, please?
No, absolutely not. Yeah. This UConn team, they've got everything that you could want and more, and it's all coming off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let alone who's on the floor already.
Yeah, me and David had briefly talked about this before, but whatever UConn is doing right now, I'm not changing it up one bit. This UConn team, even though they were the number 1 overall seed, it's almost like they're not even being talked about enough. And this is one point that I really want to bring up to how dominant this UConn team has been, not only in this tournament, but last year's tournament where they won it all. They've won their last 10 games in this tournament, all by 13 points or more. No one is getting close to beating this team, and they continue to show you why no one is getting close to beating this team.
And not
David,
only, yeah,
what
not
is
only,
oh,
sorry.
Continue.
Well, not only that, Matthew, but like if you look at UConn from the season before, last season UConn got off to I think a 14-0 start, and in that 14-0 start, they were blowing teams out of the water. And then what happened? They hit a little midseason slump, and then they got their shit back together, and then they just clowned everybody in the tournament, just like how they're clowning everybody in this year's tournament. So really, other than that midseason slump they were in last year, UConn has been straight dominating, just straight clowning teams for the past couple of years. It's really, truly remarkable what Dan Hurley has been able to build up there.
It is the Big East. I mean, they're trying to tell you the Big East is still at its best. And don't overlook the Big East, and they are here for a reason because they've been dominating. And their only weak spot, as me and David have talked about, is their 3-point shooting. I mean, and even then, they're still winning by 13 plus points a game. So I don't really think that they're hurting too much by the low
The, close,
3-point
the
percentage.
closest one they've had so far this season in the tournament is 17 points. Every other team they've beaten by at least 20 points. So, like, their 3-point shooting has not been good, but when they've been great at everything else, who cares, honestly?
Well,
as witnessed by a 30-0 run in the second half of the Illinois game.
Yeah.
I mean, who does that? That's like video game, like a professional video game player playing on the easy mode. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And like Illinois, what the hell were you even doing? Like, yeah, I get UConn is by far the best team in the country, but how do you allow yourselves to be the victims of a 30-0 run? Like, it didn't even look like you were trying half the time.
It reminds me of that playoff game in the NBA when LeBron was first in the league for the Cavs and played the Detroit Pistons in the playoffs, and he scored like the last 24 points of the game, just himself.
Mm-hmm.
No one else scored. It was just him, and it's like a video game, and that's exactly what it was. And Illinois is talented too, especially on defense. And it's like, what? You let this happen? Well, no, this is UConn. All right, but that's just one of the 4 teams. We got three other teams there in the Final Four.
Well, I do want to add something real quick, Matthew. I don't think Illinois had a particularly good defense, if I recall correctly. They were outstanding offensively, but I think their defense was like kind of, like low. It wasn't that great.
Yeah, well, they were balanced. I mean, their main flaw was their turnovers. They struggle with turnovers essentially on offense, but still, I mean, the fact that you are in the tournament, you're a 3 seed, and you give up 30 and a 30-0 run. I mean, that's even if you had the worst defense, in the country, 30-0 run,
Mm-hmm.
So it is kind of shocking to at least see numbers like that, but. The other 3 teams, as I was saying, is still Purdue, Alabama, and NC State. What exactly do they have to do to win it all?
Ed?
Tanya Harding comes to mind. Nancy Kerrigan.
Yeah.
That whole thing. That's about the closest that I can put forward to it.
Yeah.
Maybe the officiating, if Zach Edey winds up playing them in the championship game, they could be playing by the Edey rules, where everything that happens to him is a foul, but everything he does, it's fine. They're just playing. That's about the only thing I can muster up at this point.
Well,
It's going to come down to 3-point shooting, especially with Alabama and NC State. They have to hit every single shot and only be good enough in the paint. That's going to be a tall order, even for Pringle. Pringle can get down in the block, but he's going to have to do a lot of really fine interior passing to get the ball out to shooters that hit the shots. Because if they're not hitting, and it has been shown that the balls are overinflated in some of the tournament spots, so the 3-point shooters are having rough goes of it because of that. That is going to play right into UConn's hands. So unless you get almost perfect shooting, which perfect shooting for 3 points would, in my mind, is somewhere around the 60% mark, that's about the only way that you're going to stay in it.
Well, when I look at these three other teams, and I'm looking at how have they gotten here, what has been their biggest strengths, at least in the tournament, and what I see is that Alabama and Purdue are both riding the hot hands respectively with Mark Sears and Zach Edey. But then I look at NC State, and how they've done very well in this tournament is their defense. And I looked, and the teams that they've played in the tournament so far, NC State has been holding teams to about 12 points below their scoring average. It's their defense that has propelled them, this far. So, weaknesses of these teams aside, I'm looking at how have they gotten this far? What strengths have they been leaning on? What strengths can like I said, what strengths have they been leaning on so far? Because especially at this point, it feels like it's too late to kind of change up strategies. It feels like at this point, just go with whatever you're doing. I mean, you're a game away from the national championship, and yeah, obviously adjustments are important and all that. But you've made it this far doing what you've done, whatever it is that you've done best, right? So you just have to kind of hope and pray that whatever got you this far will help you make it at least one more game.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But turnovers are key, and so are free throws. I can't tell you how many times I'm seeing guys just missing free throws left and right, turning over the ball left and right, and it's like these games, like Ed said, with 60% free or at the 3-point line, that's just one of of the steps. You have to make these free throws, and you also have to cut your turnovers in half as well in order to beat a team like UConn. Because if you can't do any of those three, well, then the game's already over. So it's all those three things have to line up. Like the stars got to line up, and when it comes to that, that's where it really matters the most. And if you can't do that, you're not going to beat a team like UConn. But March 29th, which just passed, it came out in theaters. We saw Godzilla King Kong. Well, this next weekend, March 6th, we're going to have the sports version of Godzilla.
I think you mean April.
Hey, sorry, April 6th. Sorry,
Yeah.
March, April. Yeah, I don't even know what yesterday was.
Yeah.
We will see the sports world's version of Godzilla vs. King Kong, not the Walmart version. This is the sports world's version, Godzilla King Kong, and that is DJ Burns with NC State and Zach Edey of Purdue. And guys, it's a fun match. DJ Burns is pretty much the talk of the tournament. He is everyone's favorite player coming out of nowhere. He's so good. NFL wants him. That was most likely a April Fool's type of joke, but he is just fun to watch. This is a big boy who can move, and no one could really hold a candle up to Zach Edey in this tournament because of how big he is. Well, DJ Burns wants to show, well, he can. And, if this tournament has shown anything with NC State and what he's done, well, we're in for a fun matchup here. But this is just like what Ed said, not O'Doyle rules. This is Edey rules. And it's not really fair when you're playing against Zach Edey in the paint. And if you've been on Twitter online, you're seeing videos circulate left and right of Zach Edey gets, this foul called, but they don't call it the same on him, or, he's in the key for 9+ seconds, surely they got to blow a whistle, but there's a fine line there to that rule. But Ed, I mean, what do you see when it comes to these Edey rules?
Well, the arm bars that Edey has with those gigantic oars that he's got sticking out of his torso, those are, just waylaying people and nothing's being called on him. But yet he goes up to the rim and he gets, slap on the arm. That's a foul. That's him going back to the free throw line.
Yep.
I think he was averaging like 13 free throws a game. That is an insane amount. That reminds me of the old Hack-a-Shack rules. Mm-hmm. That was the prevailing theory when playing against Shaquille O'Neal in the NBA. Well, that's what they're having to do with Edey, to not have him just straight dominate him, but he is hitting a good clip on his free throws. So, and he's been able to pass from inside out, which is really confounded defense around the basket there. So even though his guards are a little more slight than some of these other guards that they're facing, that has been something that they've been able to do, just work around the 3-point line. And Edey's been getting the ball, kind of a point center type of mentality, kind of like an old David Robinson comp to me in that scenario, being able to get his guys open and get open shots because everybody's collapsing him instead. Now with the referees really allowing Edey to be fouled that many times and be called, everybody in the Big Ten is saying, hey, this is what we've been saying for 3 years. Why are you just now complaining about it? We've been
maybe because a lot of us don't watch Big Ten games, dumbasses.
Well, and also we didn't all pay for Peacock, so that's,
yeah, that too.
So that's the main thing I'm seeing with these Edey rules. It's been damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you collapse against him, you're fouling him, and he's going to the free throw line. If you don't, he's actually passing out of it and getting his shooters some open looks while still being able to turn around and hit those bunny hops, those layups, that interior game. So he's really expanded his game versus what he had last year, and that has been a big difference in how far they've come this year in the tournament.
Yeah, something that I want to say is that I know hindsight is 2020, but I feel like deep down we should have known that Purdue was going to make it this far, at least because of the whole thing about them losing to a 16 seed last year. That whole, you had to know that there was going to be some kind of redemption for them, similar to what happened to Virginia a few years ago. And I don't want to sound like I'm blaming the refs for anything, but I think they have made Purdue's redemption tour a little easy by deciding what to call on Zach Edey or what not to call on Zach Edey. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's definitely tough when you are seeing that you have to play Purdue because, one, yes, you have to deal with Zach Edey, and he's got the Kraken octopus arms. You already have to deal with him. But then on top of that, you got to deal with the Edey rules. You got to deal with, their redemption tour. But also, you have to change your game plan around because of those things. You have players that are getting in early foul trouble. You then have to switch your lineup around. There's a lot that comes with it, and it's not an easy task to be able to beat this Purdue team because of all those factors. So there's a lot that plays into it, and yes, it's in Purdue's hands. They're winning these games because of X, Y, and Z. So another team though that is in it that we haven't really talked a whole lot in depth about, but that's Alabama. We talked about Pringle earlier in Alabama. can they continue to stay hot and roll tide? Because we talked about how bad their defense is. It's bad, but here they are in the Final Four. So they're clearly doing something right. Nate Oates, is it come with him? As a start at the top, is he worthy of getting a top 5 contract? Does his team deserve to be here? I mean, yes, I think so. Just because their defense is bad, they're here. So yeah, I'd say that they deserve to be here. But can they stay hot? They are going to be facing this UConn team that we've talked so high about. What do you guys feel, David? I mean, about Alabama?
Well, I mean, let's talk about Nate Oates for a minute here. Is he worthy of a top 5 contract? Hell yes, he is absolutely worthy of being a top 5, a top 5 paid coach. Certainly, at the very least, he deserves to be the highest paid coach in the SEC. Because let's keep these things in mind, okay? He brought back just one starter from last year, and that's Mark Sears, okay? He also had to bring in 3 brand new assistant coaches, replacing assistant coaches that had been at that Alabama program for quite some time. And Alabama has made it this far with essentially a roster built on transfers. 4 of Alabama's top 5 scorers are transfer players. I can't remember the one dude that's been at Alabama his whole time there, but four of the top 5 scorers there are transfer players. And this was supposed to be a rebuilding year for Alabama. Especially, it looked like that in the beginning. I think in the beginning Alabama was 6-5 at one point, and certainly it did not look like they were going to be contenders. And yet here they are. They've made it further than anybody expected them to, and I truly believe that Alabama is the only surprise team in the Final Four. I think UConn is self-explanatory. I think Purdue is maybe a little self-explanatory, also considering what I said before. And then I know NC State is an 11 seed, but they've also been riding a hot streak since the ACC tournament. But Alabama, I truly did not expect them to make it this far. I mean, they were supposed to make it this far last year when they were the best team in the tournament. This was supposed to be a rebuilding year, and yet look how far they've come. So yes, Nate Oates absolutely deserves to be a top 5 paid coach, or at the very least deserves to be the highest paid coach in the SEC. He is a phenomenal head coach.
Yeah, I mean the SEC head coaching wise, I mean from him, Bruce Pearl, I mean SEC's got some great coaches there, but Nate Oates has done a phenomenal job, especially after losing majority of last year's team, Brandon Miller and all that, to now not having the same expectations, and maybe that's when they do best. And here they are in the Final Four, but yes, playing against a UConn team that is certainly the best in the country is going to be tough.
Yeah.
So, David, let me just clarify real quick, if I could. You're saying that Nate Oates deserves a better contract than Calipari, Rick Barnes, and Bruce Pearl.
At this point, yes. Because what have you done for me lately? And Nate Oates has been, what have you done for me lately, more so than any of those other coaches, especially Calipari. Okay, I mean, we all acknowledge that Calipari is by far the most overrated coach in the country, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
He should probably be the least paid out of all those guys, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you put him up with Rick Barnes, Nate Oates, Bruce Pearl, I'd say that Calipari should be at the bottom of that list. But Nate Oates has shown his worth, I'd say. But Alabama, here's a fun fact. They are in the Final Four, not only in college basketball, but they were also in college football's version of the Final Four as well this year. So it shows you their dominance on both football and basketball. We've always known their dominance on football. We will see how it is this next year with Nick Saban retiring. And then NC State, UConn are also in the Final Four for both the men's and women's basketball, which I think is such a really high feat.
First time that's ever happened, by the way.
Yeah.
2 teams from the men and women's side, both in the Final Four at the same time. First time that's ever happened.
Yeah. And then if you want to look more in depth when it comes to destiny, you will see UConn has won the men's and women's tournament in the same year twice. And what years were those?
I know
2004?
2014 and 2004. And what number does this year end with?
A 4. It's almost
Four.
like the San Francisco Giants, that even year magic, you know? Well, no, this is their 10-year magic of 2004, 2014. And yes, this is 2024. And both the men's and women's basketball UConn Huskies are in the Final Four. So if you're a betting man, betting woman, I mean, hey, why not?
Yeah.
So I think that is that's very interesting, and that is very tough. That the fact that both men's and women's are in the Final Four this late in a tournament, it just shows that they take this very serious and they strive to be this great every year, and here they are. But I want to transfer this over now to women's college basketball because yes, their Final Four is set as well. You've got South Carolina, Iowa, NC State, and UConn. And I can't believe it took me this long to talk about a certain individual named Caitlin Clark. And her name is everywhere. And rightfully so. She is a baller, but you have a very talented South Carolina team that is very similar to this UConn Huskies team for the men. South Carolina has not lost. They are undefeated, and it's almost looking like it's their tournament to lose. I mean, would you guys kind of agree with that?
I mean, maybe, but I also kind of feel like it's also Iowa's tournament to lose, especially because they have far and away the best player.
Yeah, but there's best player, then there's a team. You know, we all
Yeah,
know it is
yeah,
a team, but
true.
there is a reason Iowa is there, and that is because of Miss Caitlin Clark.
Mhm.
But South
But like,
Carolina
but like,
is a
so
team.
sometimes it really does come down to whoever has the best player is probably going to win the whole thing.
Make the play that wins.
Yeah,
I'm
Yeah,
looking at the fact that Gene Auriemma is in this Final Four.
yeah,
How can anybody just roll over and not think that he's got a shot to do this?
yeah.
yeah. Well, you know what's really funny about Gino, Ed, is that we know. I mean, looking at the stats, I mean, Gino is probably the best women's college coach of all time, other than Pat Summitt. Um, but even though Gino has accomplished a lot, UConn hasn't won the tournament in I can't remember 5, 6, maybe 7 years. It's been some time since they've won it, and they've kind of fallen under the radar a little bit these past few years.
That's what makes them dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, about 15 years ago, they were dominating everything. They were so far and away better than everybody else. It kind of reminds me of the Sports Illustrated cover when the Bulls were winning every year. That it was Jordan holding the basketball above everybody else's head, wondering if the Bulls were too good for the NBA. Well, people were wondering if UConn was too good for women's basketball. And maybe they were at the time. But you
Mhm.
know what? The rest of women's college basketball got better because of it. So
Mhm.
they have raised their level to match what UConn does. And it's made the game as a whole better and made it so much more watchable, all the way up to them getting a 12 million viewer rating for the Elite Eight game between LSU and Iowa. That is a massive number. That I think eclipses maybe all but maybe one women's college basketball game ever, and
I think I
that's
think
a
the pre-
huge thing.
I think the previous highest viewed Ed was the championship game last year between LSU and Iowa. So like the two games between these two teams have been the highest viewed in women's college basketball history.
Yeah, I mean, it was a rematch of the championship game. But Ed, I want to go back to your point because it kind of shows where both our minds were going. And I thought for sure you were actually making the same point, but it was close enough. You know, it reminds me back to this UConn team and Gino is is it reminded me of Phil Jackson. You had Phil Jackson with the Bulls and how dominant they were. Then there was a couple years that you didn't hear Phil Jackson's name, and then here he is on the Lakers. And now, guess what? Phil Jackson once again showed, his dominance as a coach. Well, Gino is still with the same team, hasn't been talked about for a couple years. Well, that's what also makes him scary, is that he'd come out of nowhere, this UConn team, and win it all. Everyone's talking about South Carolina being undefeated. You got Caitlin Clark, who has brought her team here once again, in the Final Four. She is, like that Davidson team with Steph Curry. It was the Steph Curry show. It's the Caitlin Clark show. And she is an amazing athlete. But here comes UConn. They could just be waltzing right in, and they could win this whole thing.
Yeah.
But I can't wait just to see how it all unfolds. We could be right. We could be wrong.
Well, and also, I don't think it's a secret. I think we can all see how much more popular at least women's college basketball has been for these past few years. And I think it boils down to a couple of things. As Ed had pretty much said, the game is a lot more balanced now. I mean, when UConn won, I think it was 4 straight championships, it wasn't just that they won 4 straight championships. Nobody else was even close to them. I mean, I'm pretty much repeating what Ed said here, but nobody could even match UConn's level at all. It was a complete joke. But the landscape has been a lot more balanced now. In fact, the only women's team lately in the past 5 or 6 years that has won it twice is South Carolina. So it's both, the game being more balanced, but also, they've been doing a really good job of marketing their stars, especially with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. And when you market your stars, what happens? You get more views. And when you get more views, you get more money, baby.
I mean, Caitlin Clark has a national commercial with State Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, when was the last time you saw that happen with a women's basketball player?
Yeah.
I can't think of any. I mean, maybe Elena Del Don, maybe.
Yeah.
Who?
Maybe Cheryl Swoops.
Oh. Yeah, maybe.
Or Candace Parker.
Candace Parker, Lisa Leslie. I mean, it's one of those that you couldn't name. You don't know because it doesn't happen often, and if it did, it was a while back. That's just how big she is, and to even top that, she's got a $5 million offer to play in the Big Three, which is Ice Cube's league, which will be way more than she'll ever make in the WNBA. I mean, she makes more now in college than she would in the WNBA. That's how big of a star she is. And she's not going to really get any bigger playing in the WNBA. And that's kind of why Ice Cube, is like, I know your worth. I want you to know your worth. Come play here, but she's just a humongous star in this sport right now. And it's generating views. Just like David said, and Ed, is this game with LSU and Iowa being the rematch of last year's championship game, 12 million views. And it just goes to show how big not only a star as Caitlin Clark is, but Angel Reese, LSU, being kind of in this villain role, it still gets you views. You are getting views. And I kind of want to hone in on that more with both of you in this post-game press conference of LSU, and more specifically Angel Reese and her comments. Embrace the villain role. It can be great if you continue to embrace the villain role. Ed?
Yeah, Angel Reese, she really did embrace the villain role on the court. Off the court, people are different when they're playing the game versus not playing the game. And what Angel Reese was essentially saying is she had the villain role, thrust upon her for the way that she reacted when she did the whole "I got the ring," thing on the court after the game last year. Well, that translated into more interest in her, but with the interest in her, you also get the positive and you get the negative portion of it. And she really, it seemed like, took the time of her press conference last night to point out how she has persevered through the negative of what she has been dealing with over the past year, being the so-called villain of women's college basketball. And I got to say, I'm proud of her for doing so, as simply because at that age and with the way that they are building brands through social media, she can't step away from social media. So she's got to take all that in, the good and the bad. And she's done a fairly decent job of, getting to this point without becoming somewhat of a cartoonish villain versus just a basketball villain. There's a different way of thinking about it, being Rodman, who was very cartoonish, but there was also Christian Leitner, he was a jerk on the court, but he was a damn good player, and that's who Angel Reese is. And I want to commend her for taking it all in and sticking with it throughout everything that she's had to go through this year. Also looking forward to what she can do at over the next couple of years as far as mitigating what that does to her mental and emotional state on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what I want to add to that is, yes, like Angel Reese is still young. She's like 20, 21, I think. And yeah, I mean, dealing with a bunch of hate at this point, all the pressure she's getting, I'm sure it's not easy to deal with at all. I think at some point though, I think she's going to realize that there's going to be idiots everywhere all the time, and I'm probably going to butcher this completely, so forgive me if I do, but I think I saw a segment with JJ Redick. I don't know if it was on his podcast or if he was a guest on somebody else's show, but he was talking about how when JJ Redick was in college, he was one of the most hated players in college basketball, if not the most hated player in college basketball. And he talked about how that weighed heavily on him, and like he really embraced that villain role, but it weighed heavily on him. And I don't remember how he said he dealt with it. I think he said he just learned to ignore the haters or whatever, but I can't remember. The point I'm trying to make is that, whatever threats, whatever, whatever disparaging comments Angel Reese is getting, it's not an excuse at all. I think she's going to realize someday that giving trolls, giving hopeless idiots like that the time of day is just not worth it, because it's like, look at where she's at, and then look at where those people are.
And one thing that I can say, at least for myself, I'm nowhere near the star that Angel Reese is at this point, but I have a sense of self at my age that provides perspective, which I did not have when I was her age. And that's something that you only get through time. So over time, I think she will learn to handle it, embrace it more, and be able to work with it more. It's just that, in that time of someone's life, they're still trying to figure out who they are and how they fit in the world. And that, especially in that realm, which she is one of the figures that is growing a sport. That is not something that a whole lot of people can relate to. So I think over time, she will learn to have that sense of self that she can pass by all that hate and just move forward.
And you know what else? And I don't remember, Ed, if we talked about this in the beginning of this episode or if we talked about it before this episode. But if Angel Reese is kind of embracing this villain role on purpose to bring more eyes to women's college basketball, then she's a marketing genius, flat out.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Draymond Green in the NBA, he has embraced that role pretty much from the get-go. And it works out for him. It really does. Yes, I get he'll get ejected, suspended, but he brings a lot of momentum and energy to that team that, he continues it through even outside of the court too. He has his own podcast. He does a lot, but he continues to make money and generate views where Angel Reese after this year, going into next year, it's no longer going to be the Caitlin Clark show. It's going to be the Angel Reese show
Well,
in
is Angel
college
Reese coming?
basketball.
Is Angel Reese coming back next year? Is that what people are saying?
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Caitlin Clark, I'm pretty sure is gonna be gone. So
Okay.
I think Angel Reese, she's what, Ed 20?
Yeah, she's 20. If I remember correctly, I know Caitlin Clark is talking about foregoing her senior year to go into the WNBA, which a lot of people have, questioned that decision.
Yeah.
But with Caitlin Clark out of the way and the full backing of ESPN promoting women's college basketball the way that they have been, Angel Reese is going to be that next star that is going to be on every commercial, every break
Yeah.
that you see on that channel.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like passing the torch right there. And
Mm-hmm.
it couldn't be for any better player. I mean, Angel Reese, she could easily be that face, and she can embrace the villain while being that face. There is nothing wrong with doing that. You just got to embrace it. You really do. And so hopefully she does. LSU, they've kind of already had that mentality. So yeah, so be it. But another team that's also embraced that mentality, and I'm going to switch sports here, and that's the New York Yankees. I mean, everyone hates the Yankees. No one. I mean, it's almost hard to even find a Yankees fan now. They used to be everywhere when they were winning World Series, but now, no, they're nowhere to be found. But here they are, undefeated. I mean, this first weekend couldn't have started better for them, because when it started, they got news that Garrett Cole's on a 60-day IL. Oh, here we go again. Yankees, here they are paying all these players, but they're all injured. And they started out 5-0. Pirates 5-0, first time since '83. You got the Tigers 4-0, the Brewers. I mean, these teams were not expected to start out like this, but here they are. I mean, so far, what has stood out to you guys with opening weekend?
Well, I think we need to put things into perspective here, because baseball, really more so than any other sport, except for probably hockey, is really more a marathon than a sprint. We see countless examples every year where teams get off to a hot start and then they crash and burn and they end up missing the playoffs. But we also see examples of teams getting off to slow starts, but then they kind of ride a hot wave going into the playoffs. So personally, I think it's a little too early to judge teams where they're at as far as wins and losses go. But I will tell you what sticks out to me from a statistical standpoint, and that is the Dodgers offense. And really what sticks out to me about the Dodgers offense is that it's been arguably the best offense in the majors. So far in the season. It is still early, yes, but they have arguably been the best offense in the league. But what's so interesting is that they've been the best offense with Shohei Ohtani kind of taking a back seat. He has not been bad by any means whatsoever. He has still been a very, very solid player. But he's not really he hasn't been really sticking out, the way that he did with the Angels. But you know what? I think that's what makes the Dodgers so dangerous, that they can take a guy like Shohei Ohtani and they can just basically turn him into a cog in the machine, So that's what sticks out to me, is the Dodgers having the best offense with Shohei Ohtani, with that guy taking a back seat to everybody else on that roster.
What I've seen is plenty of series that have animosity over the first weekend. It was chippy in Houston. And, I hate the fact that the Astros lost 4 to the Yankees to start, but Ronel Blanco kind of helped us get back on track with that no-hitter in his 8th major league start and his first opening day roster. I mean, that was that's a huge lift for a team that was reeling after starting the season 0-4 at home. That's a tough pill to take, especially after Juan Soto just basically, took us down by himself.
Yeah.
As it were. But there was the animosity in that series. There's always the animosity of the Braves and Phillies that, and the Braves went in, outscored them 25-12 and taking 2 out of 3 out of that series.
And then who did the Mets play? There was some animosity there.
That was the Brewers.
Yep. And
Rhys Hoskins was the center point of that whole deal. He went into second base and hard slid. Who knew that you could still hard slide in baseball anymore? Well, he hard slides in the second base. The bench is clear. There's and then what happens on his next at bat? They throw behind him. It's baseball being able to be baseball and police itself. Those are fun.
Yeah.
It's fun when it gets chippy. It's not fun when people are like, "Oh well, are you going out for steak tonight?" No, I'm going to have chicken. That's not fun. It's fun when there is that kind of animosity, and I really enjoyed this first weekend of it.
Yeah, I love. I know people will hate when certain things are predictable, but in this situation, I love that it's predictable. I love the fact that once he slid in hard and the bench is cleared, you knew damn well they were throwing that ball at him the next time he was up at bat, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it, and I love it. It's like here's a league where the rest of the leagues have gone soft. They could have easily banned spikes. You're not allowed to wear spikes out there, cleats, only rubber molds. And it's like, no, they continue to keep that, and they still play hard, and it's awesome. It is. It's awesome.
Let me ask you guys this, okay? So of all of the teams that are undefeated so far, that's the Yankees, the Tigers, the Pirates, and the Brewers. What teams do we think are going to sustain that? And to me, 2 teams come to mind. That is the Yankees, just because it's the Yankees, and you can never truly count them out, and the Brewers. I'm not sure the Tigers or the Pirates are going to sustain this, because again, like I said, we see countless examples of teams getting off the fast starts and then missing the playoffs. So I don't want to put too much stock into it, but just for conversational purposes, I think that the Brewers and the Yankees are the 2 teams that can sustain this level of success throughout the entire season. Ed, what do you think?
Oh, I'm actually going to disagree with you there. I'm not going to have the Yankees. The only way the Yankees make it to the postseason, even with that large of payroll, is if they mash their way to it. And yes, they play in a little league park, especially for a left-handed Juan Soto. But I'm thinking the Tigers and the Brewers are going to set themselves up, and I'll tell you why. It's because they have such a lowered bar to cross compared to what the Yankees are going to have to do to win that division, to get into the playoffs. Because when you're talking about the AL Central, you're really talking about beating the Twins. I think we can all agree that the Twins are expected to be the winner out of that division.
Yeah, they won the division last year, if I remember correctly.
And they're slated to do it again. But if the Tigers can maintain where they are, then they have a better shot of matching it or exceeding that to win the division there. The Brewers, they're in the same situation. When you have the Reds, the Cubs, and the Cardinals and the Pirates, there's not a real high bar to cross.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the Brewers do have pieces there that if everything goes right, they can cross that line.
Yeah, and I'll have to – this is going to be a little biased here, but I'll have to take the Brewers here. I mean, even after shipping out Corbin Burns, you're seeing them losing some of their starting pitchers. But
Wait, how are you being biased? You're not a Brewers fan.
no, you'll see why.
All right, all right.
But they continue to produce pitchers at a high level, and one of those contributing factors is their pitching coach, Chris Hook, who is also a customer of mine at the dealership I worked at. I talked with him
Oh, that is
personally.
so cool.
I talked with him personally, actually going into spring training, talking about the difference in the clubhouse, losing your star pitcher and all that, and how things are really going to play out for this team. And it's like, you said it right there. It's a team. It's not just one person. It is a team effort here. And since Chris Hook has arrived in the Brewers organization, I want to say 2019, they've been top 2, top 3 pitching staff in the majors, including the bullpen, all those years. He has really changed that franchise around for the good when it comes to their pitching. And we all know that a great pitching team can win you games. Of course, you need those, you need those insurance runs from your offense, but great pitching does help, and it's brought them to the playoffs a lot over those years because of the pitching. It's also won them Cy Youngs as well. So the pitching there is pretty great, and that's why I'm a little biased there on the Brewers side. But Ed, that's also your Astros team, of course. I know you talked about, but that no. Here it is. I mean, pretty early in the year, we're getting a no, and that's awesome. The fact that happened, hopefully, no garbage cans were involved. But it was. How do you respond to an 0-4 start? A no hitter. So that could be really important for an Astros team, really needing that. But players of the week, I think we've already mentioned one of them. Juan Soto, what a way to start your career in New York. I mean, New York is flashy, and he was flashy. He hit a home run, hit 450 to start out, 4 RBIs, and of course, we can't go without talking about that outfield assist that he had to win his first game as a Yankee. It really doesn't get any better than that. And then Lourdes Gurriel for Arizona. Guys, Arizona is already trying to show you that they were not a fluke going to the World Series last year, but they did play the Rockies, so we do need to really talk about that. You played the JV baseball team in Denver,
Well,
essentially.
JV team or not, they did score, I think, 16 runs through the first 3 or 4 innings, and that's just insane. I don't care who you were playing.
Yeah, 18 batters, I want to say, in the 3rd inning of that game. I mean, that should not happen.
Yeah.
But it's kind of embarrassing for Colorado, but Arizona is a pretty darn good team. But Lourdes Gurriel, he started out great with a 3.1 slash, 3 home runs, 10 RBIs. That team is really slugging the ball. And we just talked about, I mean, the 18 batters in 1 inning should show you how great their offense is.
Let me ask you guys this. Who is the worst team in baseball right now? Is it the Rockies, the A's, or the White Sox?
Aren't the Marlins 0-5? Why are you discriminating against them?
Because they're mammals.
I mean, all 3. I mean, if this is Jeopardy,
those 3 are cartoonishly bad.
Yeah.
And what really amazes me is the fact that the White Sox have the highest payroll of any team in the AL Central. And they are terrible.
Well, it also makes you wonder who's even going to these A's games. Oh yeah, not really anyone, because they're out in the parking lot protesting.
and they're gonna be moving to Las Vegas soon anyway. And yeah. Speaking of the White Sox, what's really funny, Ed? It was only just a few years ago when the White Sox were supposed to be that next great team, and then no. that did not happen.
Just real quick on the A's, the city of Oakland did ask them to sign a contract to stay there for 10 years, knowing that they're leaving for Las Vegas. It's it's going to take some time for the Vegas stadium to be built. So, and their contract is running out. Their lease is running out in Oakland. So the city of Oakland is trying to get them to stay there. So we don't have one of those Memphis Titans like halfway home.
Or the Inglewood Chargers, they play in a stadium that sits only like 10,000 people.
Exactly. So that's a possibility that they're going to stay in Oakland for, I think, 2 to 3 years before they actually make the jump over to Las Vegas. The city of Oakland's trying to make that happen.
Couldn't they just play in the Raiders football stadium? I mean, it's not uncommon for baseball teams to play in football stadiums. The A's did it for a long time.
That's why they're trying to court them to stay there for a couple more years while the stadium is being built.
That's what cracks me up about the whole Charger situation. You had the Rose Bowl, the Coliseum down there, and you picked some stadium. I mean, I said Inglewood. It might have been Norwood, Kenwood, somewhere down there, but it was
It was the soccer stadium.
Yeah, I know. It was.
It's the soccer stadium for the LA Galaxy that they played in.
Yeah.
Out of all those choices, you chose that. Yeah, but yeah, Oakland. It's the whole Moneyball thing. It's almost their demise. They. It's a toss-up between those three teams. Chicago couldn't even get a runner past first base. That's how horrible they were. It's just been embarrassing for those teams, and it's going to continue to be embarrassing for those teams.
Yeah, wasn't there some like really insane stat? And I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was like through a certain point, Chicago was the White Sox, to be exact. They were the only team to not reach first base through a certain number of innings. I can't remember what it was, but I know there was like some embarrassing stat for them.
It was to the first 2 games. Everybody else had been able to score a run. They hadn't made it past first.
Yeah, that's what it was.
So yeah, they were getting walks or hits, but only to first. They weren't getting anything after that. So you're not going to win games doing that.
Nope.
Yeah, and then losing Dylan Cease. I mean, they're just now, like you said, David. They were talked about. You had Luis Roberts. You had their shortstop, Tim Anderson. You had these players that were supposed to be stars. This was supposed to be a big team, and then now here they are. None of them.
Like I said, the White Sox were that next up and coming team, at least in the American League, and they have just completely fallen apart.
Well, they need to bring who's it, Paul Konerko back, and then maybe we'll see how things go.
Now, right now, I'm saying the up and coming team is the Kansas City Royals.
Just in time for that stadium.
Yeah.
It could play out to be that way. So, but I mean, stay tuned for more MLB baseball. I talked about 162 games. It is a long season that stretches out. Dodgers, we didn't really talk much about them besides obviously their offense, but they're still always going to be around. They're always a team to kind of keep an eye out on, especially when it comes to some of these records. David has some predictions with them. I also want to state right now, Mookie Betts will be the NL MVP. That's my prediction. I'm sticking to it. I just feel like he's going to be the real star of that LA team. So Mookie Betts, NL MVP. But yes, we're going to talk about more about baseball because there's going to be plenty to talk about. Let's see if these teams stay hot. If they don't, who will really make a surge. But also the Final Four, guys, it is upon us. Stay tuned this weekend because there are going to be some top matchups and more to talk about on that topic. But until next time, guys, hit that like, subscribe button, share these videos, and drop in the comments your predictions. Who is going to win the MLB awards and who is going to win the Final Four in both men and women's college basketball. But until next time, guys, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.